couldn't even understand.
You getting your information from what you watch on the news.
Yeah, that's
you
all I
getting
got.
information what they're feeding you. And
Yeah.
when you're in control of the media, you feed what you want to feed out there.
And to move from that, quite naturally, the spirit moves after being called up to the libation, which Brother Molefi Asante has been kind enough to wait, although he's got a busy schedule to follow, to wait and to do the libation for us. Brother.
What I'm going to ask you to do today is, when I have finished calling the names of ancestors, I'm going to ask you to also think of ancestors whose names you would like to call. It could be from your own family or from history. And I'm going to ask you to call out their names, and I will also pour libation for them. As I see the libation, I see it as an opportunity for those who have gone before, those upon whose shoulders we stand, to be here with us. This is a historic occasion. All occasions and each moment of our lives are moments of history. And so we call upon our ancestors, far and near. We call upon our ancestors, north and south. We call upon our ancestors, east and west. We call upon all of our ancestors, those of the desert, those of the forests, those of the mountains, those who are lost below the sea. We call upon all of our ancestors, far and near, to witness who we are and what we are doing. And so I call this morning on the name of Osset. I call on the name of Osa. I call on the name of Marcus Garvey. I call on the name of Frederick Douglass. I call on the name of Boukman. I call on the name of Zumbi. I call on the name of Harriet Tubman. I call on the name of Martin Luther King. I call on the name of Malcolm. And you have names in your own families and in your own histories. You may call those names now. Yes. Yes, let's hear names.
John Jackson.
Yes. Yes. Yes, let's hear names. Yes.
Annie Gunter.
Yes.
Peter Moses.
Yes. 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 We, yes. Yes. We call upon all of these names and all of the ancestors, and we ask the ancestors to be here with us, to witness not only who we are and what we will do, but also witness the spirit of our children and their children, that they shall come forth and that they shall be counted, for we are one. Asante.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And before the brother moves on after the libation, can we show some appreciation? Just. Firstly, jodi jou chemwen ouve gwan kon banan kon gwan bois. Today, moins bien. Today, my heart has opened wide like the flowers on a bunch of bananas in the wild woods. Mungo de Allah shiya kaimu anang munanang tare mungogo de Allah tare the wanang. We thank God, we really thank Him for this great blessing for have us together here today in this way. And with that, we would like also to thank the gods, to thank Atibon, Legba, Pumade, Pu Uve, Baye, Punu. And we'd like to invoke the gods further to open the doors of perception for us. We've been extremely lucky to have had already the scene set by Dr. Sante, who made quite clear some of the political reasons why there is a deliberate move to foster a deliberately Eurocentric media. We had Dr. Jeffries indicating further the processes of that media and how, if you like, the media attack is orchestrated. In terms of the next session that we are valuably represented by Brother Browder, is to focus on our own symbolism as a means of looking at what we are, what we will be, and what we want to do with that symbolism in the face of the abuses of images of us, ideas and symbols of us that the Europeans focus on. In terms of the self-description of the brother, it is very humble, but in a sense indicates the dynamism that we need to elaborate. In his self-description, he describes himself as a chronicler of facts and information relative to the positive portrayal of the worldwide African experience. In a way, I read that as saying, look, I'm a griot. Look, I am in this tradition which in the long term looks at the psychological mission of reclaiming the past and putting it into the future and ensuring that the future is in the present. The brother is an author, a cultural historian, artist, and educational consultant. He's lectured throughout the USA, Mexico, Africa. He even took time to spy on the Japanese and the Europeans. He has made quite a number of numerous TV and radio interviews, both on the side of the interviewee, in being the interviewee himself, and also being the interviewer. So he's seen both sides of the presentation of symbolism. He's moved further and, due to his experiences, decided to become the founder and director of the Karmic Guidance. And in that, he uses ancient Egyptian African history and metaphysics, i.e. to reclaim the past, to put it into the present, to guarantee our future. He sponsors lectures and seminars, conducts Afrocentric tours of Washington, D.C., organizes study groups throughout the USA, and in terms of Africa, the Brother Domes, he personally escorts annual study tours to Egypt and Africa, and in fact has recently come from one which took him to areas such as Senegal, Gambia, Ghana, and the Ivory Coast with his daughter, and that will be the subject of one of his new books with his daughter. His major works so far have included 22 essays in the African American experience, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, and My First Trip to Africa. In terms of one of these books, the Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, I am assured that you can get a 25% discount plus him signing it later on with one of the booksellers outside. What we want to do, without further ado, is to get into that discussion with Brother Browder, on this whole issue of the images of ourselves and how we reclaim the future by taking the past and ensuring that it's in the present. I think the brother's praise poems speak for himself. We are very lucky to have Brother Browder with us, and if we can start even without even hearing him on telling him we know and thanks for being here.
Oh, man. Good morning, sisters and brothers. Hotep, yes. I'm really pleased to be here. This is my third trip to England, second trip to Manchester, and every time I'm here, I feel very warmly welcome, and I thank the brother for the very generous introduction, and I would do my best to live up to the responsibilities that Brother Paul has placed on my shoulders. Yeah, they've been tremendous. The topic for my presentation today is African symbolism, European abuses, and African uses. And what I basically want to draw upon is my personal experience as an artist, as a designer, as well as a historian, to show you the importance of imagery, how the imagery has been developed by African people, how it has been incorporated into our lives, and then to go on and show you how these very same concepts and ideas and images have been distorted by non-African people and have been very much incorporated into the media, which affects and influences all of us, whether we are conscious of it or not, and then begin to focus on how you can begin to protect yourself and the minds of your children from the negative effects of the media. I want to begin by talking about the roots of Nile Valley symbolism, and I think probably one of the best examples of not only Nile Valley symbolism and culture, but also African history and culture is the libation. I mean, if you truly understand the essence of the libation, to call forth the ancestors, the spirits of those who have come before you, to come and to fill this room with their presence. You can't see them, you can't smell them, you can't touch them, but they are here. And when you call upon them, they will come to you, they will come to this body, and they will inspire you or inspirit you and give you the direction to deliver the presentation or the understanding to be able to process the information that is being delivered so that you can begin to understand what it is that you must do with this knowledge to ensure the survival of your offspring. That is what this process is all about. And quite often, we're dealing with a level of reality that others cannot understand. So they call it superstition. They call it witchcraft. They call it mumbo jumbo, only because they are incapable of understanding this high level of communication. So when we look at symbolism, we also have to view symbolism from this perspective. You have to realize that symbolic imagery is one of the oldest and most potent forms of communication in the history of humankind. A picture. The Asians have a saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That is, words are sacred, and pictures or images have the ability to convey more information than I can say in 1,000 words. That is the reason why the writing form of the inhabitants of the Nile Valley were referred to as Medu Neter, which means the word of God or the writings of God. The Greeks later called them hieroglyphics or sacred carvings. They were sacred, but they were also the messages from the Creator. Let's look at some of these messages so that we can begin to understand the significance of their presence. Because if you truly understand the power of images to convey information, and if you can properly condition your mind to receive the information that is being presented, then it's not necessary for me to say anything. All I have to do is flash images, and you will understand everything that I want to say or will ever say. This is a powerful form of communication. And so when we look at the medu neter, and when we begin to understand the meanings or some of the meanings behind it, we can begin to realize that we are talking about a higher form of communication. For example, the symbol of the flag that was used in Kemet, flags that stood in front of the temples in Kemet, were a symbol for the presence of the neter, which is God or the Creator. If you look at the flag waving in the breeze, you're seeing a reaction to the presence of the Creator. This unseen force is moving this piece of material so that you begin to become conscious of the reality that there are forces in your environment that cannot be seen, cannot be smelled, but they are there nonetheless. You look at the symbol for Asar, who represents the first documented story in the history of humanity of a crucified and resurrected Savior. That represents the potential that exists within all of us to raise and to elevate our consciousness. One of the primary symbols for Asar was the Tekken, the symbol that the Greeks later called the obelisk. It is a symbol which has a variety of meanings, but more specifically, it represents the resurrection of Asar. Asar's son, Heru, we know him by his Greek name, Horus, was the product of an immaculate conception, was the product of a virgin birth, and yes, 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus the Christ, Asar was born on December the 25th. Or Heru was born on December the 25th. They both were born on December the 25th, according to the story. He represents the resurrection of his father. He represents the ability to transform energy. He represents the dominant power of the Creator in activities pertaining to life, as his father represented the dominant powers of the ability of the Creator in death. Asar became the Lord of resurrection. Some of the symbols associated with Heru were the falcon. Falcon is a bird which flies thousands of feet in the air and has keen vision, is able to see everything on the earth below. So the eye of Heru, the right eye of Heru, is symbolic of the eye of God, the omnipresent eye of the Creator, which has the ability to see everything, everywhere, all the time. Very powerful, very important symbols. Another primarily important symbol is that of Her-Em-Akhet, or the Sphinx. This is a symbol which represents the power of the Creator, the power of the Son of God, which is inherent in every human being. The statue of Her-Em-Akhet is probably one of the oldest statues ever carved by human beings on this planet. 240 feet long, 66 feet high. The face of this statue is almost 14 feet wide. It has the head of Heru, the Son of God, and the body of a lion. This statue is symbolic because the head of Heru represents the divine intelligence that exists within every human being. The body of a lion represents the animal nature that also exists within every human being. When you combine the two, and when you look at this image of the lion sitting down very calmly, very quietly, what it represents is that through the elevation of your mind, through the refinement of your intellect, you are able to control your lower animal nature. And that was a symbol which represented divine human perfectibility, the process that exists within every one of you. So these symbols were very much a part of our history and our culture. We must understand that. We must also be able to see and to interpret these symbols through African eyes. Because what has happened throughout the years is that when other people interpret African symbols without having an understanding or an appreciation for African culture, they will turn those symbols upside down, and they will ultimately mean the exact opposite of what they were designed to represent. So if we can lower the screen and also turn off the lights or lower the lights, I want to share with you some images that will help to reinforce some of these concepts that I'm sharing with you. One of the things that I traditionally like to do in doing presentations is to use images. I use my experience as an artist to help you to see and to understand the importance of the symbols, how they can be interpreted, and more importantly, how they can be used in your life. This is an image of Asar, one component in the African trinity of Asar, Aset, and Heru. This is the man who was the first resurrected Savior in the history of humanity. The symbol of the resurrection of Asar is the Tekken. Traditionally, there were always two of these structures flanking the entrances to the temple in Kemet. Wherever you would see two of these Tekkenu in front of the entrances to the temples, they would represent the masculine and feminine complementary aspects of the Creator. See, if you understand something about the concept of spirituality in Kemet, it was expressed in a duality. Every male nature had his female counterpart. So in other words, one of the things that the Africans attempted to achieve is a balance or harmony between the masculine and feminine complementary aspects of the Creator. It's important to also understand that in Kemet, there were over 1,200 of these structures. Today, if you were to go there, you will find less than a dozen. What happened to the rest of them? They were stolen by Europeans and carted off to the four corners of the earth. This is from the temple of Ramesses at Luxor. Originally, there were two. Today, there's only one because we know that in 1834, Muhammad Ali, who was then the ruler of Egypt, gave the other Tekken to his friend, King Louis Philippe of France, in exchange for a clock, which now stands in the mosque of Muhammad Ali, a clock that never worked. So the companion to this Tekken is now standing at the Palace de la Concorde in Paris, France. Remember that this is a symbol which represents the resurrection of Asar. It is a symbol which preceded the resurrection of Jesus the Christ by at least 4,000 years. And I think it's important that you understand the significance of this day, Easter Sunday, and you have to be aware of the fact that every Easter Sunday, the Pope, in this instance, Pope John Paul II, delivers his Easter sermon standing on his balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square. And in the middle of St. Peter's Square is a Tekken, which was stolen from Kemet. You can see it right here, standing in the middle of St. Peter's Square. There are literally thousands of worshipers surrounding this symbol which represents the resurrection of Asar. The Pope is conscious of this, but do you think he's going to tell his followers that they are really worshiping an African concept of God? No. Because of the power, because of the fear that too many people have of African history, African culture, and African symbolism. Here's an image from the cover of my latest publication, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. It was painted by my good friend and associate brother Michael Brown, who has a table right downstairs. Brilliant artist. And what I wanted him to do in this particular cover, or this particular painting, was to recreate the appearance of Hair Maquette as it may have looked the day after it was created, before Napoleon shot off the nose and the lips, before the Tekken was removed from in front of it. This is a symbol which represents the divine aspect of the Creator which exists within every human being. You must understand that this is not a sphinx. The word sphinx is a Greek word. This was created thousands of years before there was a Greece, thousands of years before there was a European. And the concept of a sphinx represents the exact opposite that this image does. If you look at the word sphinx in a dictionary, you'll see that it means to strangle or to hold. The word sphinx comes from the Greek story of Oedipus, Oedipus Rex. And according to the story of Oedipus, this is a Greek sphinx. According to the story of Oedipus, the sphinx was a monster which had the head and breast of a woman and the body of a lion. Why did it have the head of a woman? Because the Greeks believed that women were inherently evil, that women were inferior to men. The Greeks were the people who legitimized the concept of homosexuality because they believed that the greatest love that a man could ever have is with another man. That is contrary to the African understanding of creation. It takes a man and a woman to create life. That is why when they expressed the Neteru, they were always male and female, and they were always complementary of one another. One was not superior to another. They needed one another for their existence. And so when we see the Europeans taking an African concept, they twisted it around and distorted it. If you study the story of Oedipus, Oedipus was traveling along the road that led to the city of Thebes. Thebes in Greece was named after the city of Thebes, or Waset in Kemet. Okay, you understand the parallels? And the Sphinx was a monster that sat perched on a cliff alongside of the road that led to the city of Thebes. And the Sphinx would ask a riddle called the riddle of the Sphinx, pose this riddle to every person who walked along that road. The riddle was what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening. And the more legs that it walks on, the weaker it becomes. The riddle was a metaphor for the human experience. It was not meant to be taken literally. And I'll talk a little bit more about interpreting knowledge and information. But the riddle of the Sphinx was a metaphor for the human experience. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the evening, 3 legs in the afternoon? Whoever could not answer this riddle was strangled by the Sphinx. Hence the word Sphinx meaning to strangle or to hold. Oedipus answered the riddle. Understanding the riddle was a metaphor for the human experience, the answer was man. Man walks on 4 legs in the morning of his life as a child on all 4s. 2 legs in the afternoon of his life as an adult on 2 legs. 3 legs in the evening of his life as an elder with a cane. So after having given the correct answer, the Sphinx then commits suicide by jumping off of a cliff. Oedipus then goes into the city of Thebes where he murders his father, marries, and has sex with his mother. This is Greek nonsense. This is why Freud talks about every man has an Oedipus complex. Every man wants to have sex with his mother. That's European bull. It's insanity. And if you don't understand that Herr Market represents the potential for the divine that exists within you, if you don't understand that, and if you buy into the European concept of the Sphinx, you will believe that you as a male want to have sex with your mother. Or as a mother, you believe your son wants to have sex with you. What is this nonsense? The nonsense is the truth turned upside down. We need to be very clear of these realities. We need to be very clear of these distortions. Let me show you another distortion. I see many sisters wearing the Nefertiti necklaces and bracelets. Here's a book, the cover of a book that I happened to have found last year in a bookstore in London, right across from the British Museum. This is a photograph of the original bust of Nefertiti. Well, the original bust of the woman that they call Nefertiti, because they don't know who this is. This was found on the floor of an abandoned artist studio in Kemet. It was unfinished, it was unnamed. So the discoverers have no idea who it was. They just assumed it was Nefertiti. But this is a photograph of the original bust when it was found. And you can see here in this original, you can see that it was originally broken into at least 3 pieces. You see a crack that runs down the entire crown, follows the contour of the ear that is broken, comes all the way down around the neck. So the statue was broken into at least 3 different pieces and was fused together. Again, notice here the crack along the ear. Notice the gash above the eyebrow. Now, This is the original bust. What happened was the two German Egyptologists who found it took it back and they cleaned it up. They repaired it. And this is the image that is now on display. Notice, you no longer see, this is a copy. You no longer see the crack in the crown, even though the ear is still broken. You no longer see the gash above the eye. And let me show you one other point. Let me go back. Here you don't see she had an earplug in her ear. Here it's filled in. Let me go back if I can. Yeah. Okay, here you see an earplug where an earring was in the original. It's gone in the copy. You also notice that the skin is lightened. The lips are a little thinner. The nose is a little narrower. This is the Europeanization of African people in African history. They have been doing this for hundreds of years. But if you don't know how to reclaim your history through a correct identification of the symbols, then you will be lost. You will be confused when it comes to debating this issue as to whether or not the Egyptians were black or white. I mean, can you imagine the foolishness of this debate? Were the Egyptians black or white? I mean, the Egyptians were Africans. Need we say more? Does the question ever come up as to whether or not Europeans were black or white? It is assumed that Europeans are all white, even though the first Europeans were African. Let's deal with some other distortions of African history, African culture, and African symbols. Here's a photograph of Ramesses II from his temple at Abu Simbel. Ramesses, you know, was one of the longest living kings in ancient Kemet. He was also one of the most prolific builders, and it has been said that he fathered over 100 children. Ramesses was the original Xerox man. He believed in reproducing himself as often as possible. All right? This is a documented reality. But yet, let's see how they treat Ramesses. Here is a photograph of Ramesses condoms. Can you believe this? Ramesses condoms. Now, this image is directly opposite of the image of Ramesses II. Ramesses did not practice birth control. But yet, were you to see this product, then you would come to the wrong conclusions, even though Africans in the Nile Valley were responsible for developing the first systems of birth control, the first spermicides. They had developed that during the time of Hatshepsut. We know that. We also know that the Africans were responsible for developing the first pregnancy tests, where they would have a woman who suspected that she was pregnant urinate in a bowl, and they would place in that bowl a bag of wheat or a bag of barley, a bag of wheat and a bag of barley. And if the wheat sprouted, it meant that the woman was pregnant and that she was going to have a female child. If the barley sprouted, it meant that she was pregnant and she was going to have a male child. And if both sprouted, I assumed she was going to have twins, one of each. And it's important also to understand that this test was developed around 1800 BCE. The urine pregnancy test was not developed by European physicians until around 1928. And the test to determine the sex of an unborn child was not developed until 1938. So we're talking about a level of scientific knowledge, a level of philosophical knowledge, a level of spiritual knowledge that had been developed by African people thousands of years ago, knowledge and information which is now being claimed by the European. And if you don't understand the importance of claiming your history, then you will not be able to defend yourself against their attacks. Okay? Let's look at some other images. Let's deal with the more contemporary aspect of symbolism in the media. One of a series of ads that were created by an Italian clothing company, Benetton, have always played on the race issue or the color issue. The advertising campaign for Benetton has been the slogan of the United Colors of Benetton. And in most of their ads, they portray the differences between the races, black and white. Here, let me show you down at the bottom, move these microphones out of the way. You see a photograph of an ad that I believe was run here in Europe, but was not run in the United States. It's an ad that portrayed an African woman nursing a European child. That ad ran over here, but it did not run in the United States. Because the last thing in the world white Americans or European Americans wanted to see was the truth. You need to understand, you need to understand that those who create advertising understand the power of the images. And so therefore they want to be able to control what images are projected into the minds of certain people. Here is a photograph. I don't know if this ad ran here. Okay, it did run in England. It was very prominently displayed in the United States. There were huge 5-foot ads plastered on bus stops throughout all of Washington, D.C., in my hometown. But if you study this ad, you will also see that it reinforces negative stereotypes about black people. If you use the English language to identify your cultural orientation, if you limit the description of yourself to an adjective, the word black, and if you use the English language, you will wind up distorting your perceptions of reality, because in the English language, there are approximately 127 adjectives for the word black, and 125 of them are negative. Black male, black ball, black list, Black Friday, black sheep. Black is negative. Black is associated with evil. White is associated with purity, with God, and with angels. And this ad reinforces that stereotype. Here you see a black child whose hair is cut in horns, like a devil, standing next to a very angelic-looking white child. Need to be aware of the images and concepts that are in the media. You need to understand that they can oftentimes reinforce negative stereotypes. Black cake is called what? What do you call black cake? Devil's food cake. What do you call white cake? Angel's food cake. Something as simple as food reinforces negative stereotypes if you buy into the lie. And you see it constantly reinforced. Here is an ad for a television program which ran in the United States. The program was entitled Good and Evil, about two sisters. One sister was good, the other sister was evil. The good sister is dressed in white. You see the word good in white letters and a halo above the letter G. The evil sister is dressed in black. See the word evil written in black letters and has a horn and a tail. Negative images. You need to be conscious of how we are constantly being manipulated. Let me just share with you some realities. I had worked for several advertising agencies in the 70s and early 80s. And one of the things that you must be conscious of is that everything you see in the media, whether it's television, whether it's print, whether it's in the movies, everything that you will see in the media is determined by a handful of men who are usually Caucasian. And they will sit down at a table, the art director, the photography director, the writer, the producer, and they will determine every element that is going to be incorporated into that scene. Nothing is left to chance. So it is a very calculating business. Everything that you see is designed to affect and to influence your thinking, whether you are conscious of this reality or not. Let me share with you another image. This, I don't know what your politics are relative to the movie, but I want you to be conscious of this reality. This is from the cover of Jet magazine, an African-centered publication, or should I say a Negro-centered? Yes, it's a Negro-centered. There's a difference now between an African and a Negro. It's a Negro-centered publication. And it features the two lead actors in Spike Lee's movie Jungle Fever, which is about an interracial relationship, an African-American architect and his Italian-American secretary. Okay? The movie was released on June the 1st, 1991, and the photograph of the two lead actors were on the cover of two national publications in America on the same week. One publication was Jet magazine, the other publication was Newsweek, which is a European-centered publication. This is Jet Magazine, this is Newsweek. Okay? Now, I want you to be conscious of several realities. In the media, you're laughing, but it ain't funny. Okay? It's not funny. See, because in the media, height denotes power. And in America, as I'm sure it is here, there is a hierarchy to power. And that hierarchy is white male, white female, black male. That is the hierarchy. Let's go back and look at Jet Magazine. Here you see the more traditional pose of a man and a woman. Men are traditionally taller than women. So it is assumed that men are more powerful than women. Here's the traditional pose of a man and a woman, but here is the European perspective. Now remember, the art director had dozens of pictures to choose from for the cover of this national magazine, but they selected a cover that would reflect the editorial policy of that specific publication. They also selected a title. The writer was there to select the title. The title is Tackling a Taboo, which is to suggest that interracial relationships are taboo. And the picture would reinforce that. Look at the images of the two characters there. You see, Wesley is not smiling, and he's down, has his head on her shoulder, and her hand is on his shoulder as if to almost push him away. Contrast that pose to this pose. Then also take note of their skin complexion. Here you see a more even range between their skin tones. Here you see a greater contrast. In the Newsweek photograph, they darkened Wesley's face and lightened the sister's face in order to show a greater contrast to reinforce the title, Tackling a Taboo. So what I'm trying to get you all to understand, to be conscious of, sisters and brothers, is that everything that you see has been determined by people who oftentimes don't have your best interests at heart. Okay? Here are some photographs from an invitation that was sent out by the Indiana State Medical Association for a reception that they were having in January of this year in Indiana. The theme of that conference was jungle fever, and they portrayed an African as a cannibal with a bone in his nose, cooking two white people in a pot. These are the images that most people have of Africa, images that come from Tarzan, written by this good British author. All of these Tarzan stories about a white man coming to Africa and becoming the king of the jungle. Can you imagine that? Talking to all the animals, got black folks bowing and straight to his every command. Never taking into account the reality that Tarzan, if he lived in the jungles of Africa, would probably die of skin cancer within a matter of 5 years. But they create this myth in the media. They create these films, and they are shown all over the world. And people begin to believe that the European is going to be king no matter where he goes. These images are perpetuated. When the displeasure of this particular invitation was brought to the attention of the producers of this event, they recoiled and say, well, we didn't know it was offensive. We did not know that it was offensive. 1994 now. That was the same thing that the employees of AT&T said when they produced this illustration last year in their publication. This is a cartoon that depicted various peoples of the world using telephone systems designed by AT&T. Here you see a Caucasian in America on the phone, talking to a Caucasian in South America on the phone, talking to two Caucasians, one in Northern Europe and one in France, wearing a beret. And in Africa, what do you have? A gorilla on the telephone. And when the black employees at AT&T said this is a disgrace, a damnable disgrace, then the producers of this publication backpedaled and said, we're sorry, we did not know it was offensive. They printed 300,000 of these publications and sent them throughout the world, and then said only after it was brought to their attention, we did not know it was offensive. They knew exactly what they were doing. The art director knew exactly what he was doing. The editor knew exactly what he was doing. So these images have been created and perpetuated in order to continue to ingrain in the minds of every person that Africans are less than human. So how dare you say that the Egyptians were African? They couldn't have been, because Africans don't have the intelligence to create these profound things. Understand the battle that you must fight. Check this out. Last week was the Academy Awards, and the highest award given by the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences is the Oscar, all right? But do you realize the Oscar was patterned after the image of Ptah for Menefer? Same image. Look at the position of the hands and the feet. Same concept. Do you realize that Ptah was the patron god of artists and craftsmen in Kemet? Concepts are all the same. And what they have done is to steal your images in order to legitimize themselves. It has been happening over and over and over again, and will continue to happen until you assume responsibility for reclaiming your history and the images associated with your history. This is not a game that we're talking about. This is very serious business, and I want you to also understand the extent to which images have been incorporated into motion pictures, specifically images that have been targeted at your children. See, all of our children grow up watching cartoons, and we believe that it's all right for the children to watch cartoons, violent cartoons that portray all types of aggressive behavior. A movie which won a number of Academy Awards several years ago was the movie Roger Rabbit, starred a British actor, Bob Hoskins. It just came out 2 weeks ago that the image, I don't know if you can see it, the image of Jessica Rabbit, who is the wife of Roger Rabbit, a very voluptuous woman. It just came out 2 weeks ago that in the Laserdisc copies of Roger Rabbit, people have found scenes where in one frame of the Laserdisc, they found scenes of nude images of Jessica. They found other scenes where, as she was turning to walk away in the cartoon, her dress would flip up and reveal that she had on no underwear. So when this was brought to the attention of some of the animators, they admitted, well, yeah, we put those scenes in there, and artists, animators have been doing it for over 50 years. It's like a little secret that they have between one another. You know, when you create cartoons, the film of the speed is 30 frames per second. So if they drop one frame of a nude character in that cartoon, it moves faster than the eye can perceive, but the subconscious is aware of every one of those frames. That's why they have been putting those images there. And they can only be busted now because the technology exists to isolate that one individual frame. And when this is brought to their attention, they admit we've been doing it for years. They have been planting subliminal messages in cartoons and movies for years. So when you find yourself doing bizarre things and can't explain why you do them, you must realize you are being programmed for this specific type of behavior. So who do you trust your children to, knowing this reality? And what responsibility are you going to assume for controlling the images that are shown to them? Questions that you must ask and answer. Let's deal with some other images, some other African images that are profoundly important, specifically in my home country, the United States of America. The symbols that represent the heart and soul of the United States of America are symbols that can be directly traced back to ancient Africa. The Great Seal of the United States was a project that was commissioned by a committee, a presidential committee, that was in existence for 6 years. It took them 6 years to design these two symbols. And as an artist, I want you to be aware of the reality that someone did not sit down and arbitrarily decide that they were going to draw a pyramid and put an eye above a pyramid and draw an eagle and put all of these things in the eagle's talons. Every aspect of this symbol was argued on and debated on by a group of men that sat around a table and determined what specific concepts and ideas they wanted to incorporate into the seal, which was to represent what is now the most powerful nation on the face of this planet. And if you understand the whole concept of the development of the United States was founded by Europeans from Britain who were kicked out of this country because the jails were too full, and they were sent to America with hopes that they would soon die. And when they realized that, hey, there's a lot of land here, there's a lot of food here, there's mineral resources here, they began to realize that they could make a living there, then the British decided, hey, we want this land back. That's what the whole Revolutionary War was all about. It was a war for control of this new land called America. And the Revolutionary War, in my next publication, the second volume of Exploding the Myths, we're going to deal specifically with an African-centered view of Washington, D.C., Masonry, and the United States. And what you will find is that the Revolutionary War was nothing but a war between two feuding Masonic factions fighting for the control of this new territory. And both of these organizations, the Scottish Rite Masonic Organization and the York Rite Masonic Organization, was nothing more than organizations of Europeans who had obtained minute elements of ancient Nile Valley knowledge and attempted to use this information to conquer the rest of the world. That is what this symbol represents. Look at the symbols here. Are there any pyramids in England, Scotland, Ireland, Italy, France, Germany? The only place you'll find pyramids is where African people have lived. The eye above the pyramid represents the eye of Heru, the son of Asar and Aset, African symbols. The eagle on the front of the dollar bill is a stylized version of Heru, the son of Asar and Aset. This symbol was created over 5,000 years before this symbol. So when it came to creating the symbols which were to represent the most powerful nation on the face of this planet, the so-called founding fathers of the United States went all the way back to Africa because of the importance associated with those symbols and the descendants of the people who created it. That's why we were enslaved. If you understand this inscription, Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new secret order. The United States of America is a new secret order which was founded in the year written in Roman numerals at the base of the pyramid, 1776. The inscription at the top means Annuit Coeptis, that the Creator, God, has endowed the creation of this country with unlimited wealth. And if you understand the historical reality that you see here on this symbol, you'll realize that the new order, the new secret order, was founded on knowledge which came from Africa. And the reason why America was blessed with unlimited wealth was that it was responsible for enslaving hundreds of millions of Africans and used them as a free labor source for over 350 years. Of course they're going to be wealthy if you don't have to pay people for their labor. That is the reality. But you also need to be aware of the fact that also encoded within this symbolism is a level of knowledge and information that most people are not aware of. Look at the symbolism. And again, understand that every element that you see here represents profound concepts and ideas that the average person knows nothing about. Look at the pyramid. The pyramid is comprised of 13 courses of stone. Look at the eagle here. The eagle has in one claw an olive branch which has on it 13 leaves and 13 berries. The eagle has in the other claw 13 arrows. The eagle has on his chest a shield with 13 stripes. The eagle has above his head a cluster of 13 stars, which form the shape of 2 pyramids. In total, the number 13 is repeated 13 times on the dollar bill. What's the significance of that? We've been led to believe that 13 is an unlucky number. If that is the case, then why was this country founded with 13 colonies instead of 12? Instead of 10? Obviously, there must be another interpretation of the number 13. So when you begin to understand something about the mindset of the Europeans who created the country of America, you begin to realize that they were attempting to resurrect knowledge which came from the Nile Valley to establish what has now become the most powerful nation on the face of this planet. And they realized that the number 13 was not an unlucky number, but that it represented the process of spiritual transformation. I understand the reality that the number 12 represents the completion of a cycle. It's in 12 hours a day, 12 hours at night during the time of the equinox, 12 months in a year. So 13 is the energy moving from that completed cycle into a higher spiritual state, the process of spiritual transformation. You can see this story has been told over and over again in the history of Europeans and Americans. King Arthur, here in England, had how many knights in the round table? 12 plus King Arthur is Jesus the Christ had how many disciples? 12 plus Jesus is 13. When you celebrate Christmas, you sing a carol about how many days of Christmas? 12 days of Christmas. And the 13th day of Christmas is January the 6th, the day of the Epiphany, or the day of the spiritual transformation of Jesus the Christ. So there's nothing unlucky about the number 13. That is why the United States of America, the birthday of the United States of America is on July the 4th, 1776. 76 is 13. They had a slogan during the war, the Revolutionary War, called the Spirit of 76, the spirit of spiritual transformation. July the 4th falls exactly 13 days after the summer solstice, which fell on June the 21st in the year 1776. All right, so you need to understand that all of this stuff is hooked up and associated with levels of knowledge and information that ain't European in origin. It can be traced all the way back to Africa. And as long as you can be disconnected from the symbolism, disconnected from the knowledge, the science, disconnected from the African concepts of God, then you will be psychologically prepared to accept any lie that is given to you by your European masters. I apologize for this ad, which is backwards, but this was an ad that was created by the Black-Owned Communications Alliance. It was an organization of Africans. The organization is now defunct, and it reads, "What's wrong with this picture?" Even though the type is backwards, you can still see what's wrong with that picture. The Black-Owned Communications Alliance was an organization formed by African Americans in the field of communication who understood that the images that were a part of advertising distorted perceptions of the African American experience. And so they produced this ad as part of a campaign to challenge these distortions. And they asked a very important question: what happens to the mind of your child who grows up seeing images of Europeans as great heroes and sheroes? And the only images of themselves that they see are niggers, clowns, and buffoons. That child will grow up believing that they do not have the potential for intelligent behavior, that the best they can be is a clown if they choose to be black, or if they want to be intelligent, they must act like Europeans. That is a lie. So as parents, what is your responsibility? You have an obligation. You have a commitment to help your child understand the negative effects that are present in the media, to insulate your child from these negative images, and to replace these negative images with positive images. There's most of the programs that we see in the media, and I understand some of you all in England can get this program on cable, In Living Color. This program which has been running in the United States for several years is a damnable disgrace. The stereotypes that they show every week on television were images that we have been fighting to remove from the minds of our people. And what you see is a constant pattern of African men dressing up as women, African men portrayed as homosexuals and transvestites, and then we wonder what's wrong with our men. We need to be conscious of the power of these images, and I understand that you all will soon be getting cable here in Manchester. If you get cable, you don't want this program. You don't want this program. Or if it comes, you need to understand the negative stereotypes which are incorporated into this program, and you need to be able to critique them. And to have to sit down with your children and to tell your children why this character is not funny. So your child will at least be able to understand that they must process the information that is presented to them and not accept it wholeheartedly. You know, so what my responsibility has been as a parent, as a single parent, raising my daughter, is to try to protect her from the evils that I know exist in the media. So that's the reason why when I took my daughter to Egypt with us in 1989, I wanted her to understand at an early age what it took me to understand very late in my life. I wanted her to understand something about our history and our culture. And so that's why we wrote her book, My First Trip to Africa. That's why at age 8, she wrote the book when she was 8, she's now 11. And at the age of 8, I made a covenant with my daughter. And that covenant was that wherever we travel outside of the United States, we will write a book about your experience. And the proceeds from the sale of that book will go into a trust fund to pay for your college tuition. So I am now teaching my daughter two realities. One, she is going to college, and two, she is going to help pay for her college tuition. So the reality is, and the game plan is very simple. As we travel to different parts of the world, we're going to write a book. We just went to West Africa last year, so we were working on our next book. By the time she is 17, she'll have at least 6 publications, 6 books to her credit, and $100,000 in the bank. Her college tuition is taken care of. It is simple. It is very simple. And the reality is, as my daughter travels and speaks now, she travels across the country giving presentations to churches and schools and various organizations, talks about her experience as a young author. And it's important to understand how children respond to her, seeing one of their peers talking about her travels to Africa. And the peers say, well, I want to go to Africa. Despite the negative images, despite the Tarzan images, despite the cannibals. I had an interesting experience a couple of years ago. I met this brother. I was doing a presentation in Hawaii. I met a brother who was from Nigeria who had married an African-American sister. The brother came to me and said that he had a daughter who was 7 years old. And for the last 3 years, he had been trying to interest his daughter in traveling to Nigeria to meet her grandparents, his mother and father. And his daughter, from the age of 4, told her daddy she did not want to go to Africa because she was afraid of being eaten by wild animals. Even though her father is African, her grandparents are African, she already had this image in her mind of Africa as nothing but a jungle. The brother said that he bought his daughter a copy of my daughter's book. She read the first sentence, which said, I was 7 years old when I made my first trip to Africa. She said to her daddy, Daddy, she was 7 years old when she went to Africa. I'm 7 years old. Can I go to Africa? All it took is one positive image. And you've got to realize you have the responsibility to create those positive images for your children. And so, in dealing with my child, in continuing to meet these challenges, when she was 5, when my daughter was 5, she came home and said that they were having a Halloween party at school. And she wanted to go to the Halloween party as Snow White. I had to stop and think about it for a minute. Why would she want to go? She should know better. Why should she want to go as Snow White? And I thought about it, and I remembered that the movie Snow White was being re-released, and so they were advertising it heavily on television, in the newspaper, and on the back of cereal boxes. So it was my responsibility then to tell my daughter, baby, I don't think Snow White is an acceptable image for you. If I'm going to allow you to participate in this pagan celebration, then at least I'm going to exercise my right to determine what image you will wear. I'm not going to have you go as Snow White. I'm not going to have you go as a witch, as a ghost, or some kind of monster. We will find an image that would allow you to express some degree of your history and your culture. So we went to the store and I walked up and down the aisles. I saw images of Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, figments of other people's imagination, but nothing that would reinforce within the mind of my child some sense of self. So I said, we will come home and we will make a costume. And so I'm driving home and I'm kicking myself in the butt. Browder, you make these things, you get into these positions. What are you going to do? But I figure I'm just as creative as any of these other people out here. So I looked at some images that I had seen when I was in Kemet, and I saw an image of the goddess Nut. And we made her first costume in the image of Nut, okay? And so every year since then, we would dress her up as some African personality. Here's a photograph of my daughter is Queen T, okay? And what's been interesting is the reaction of her classmates to her coming in as these African personalities. What has happened, she won the contest for best costume. The particular year she wrote this. And what has been happening now is that the other sisters and brothers in their class have been also coming to school now dressed as African personalities. You see a little brother come in as Imhotep. Sister come in as Queen Nzinga. All right? You've got to realize, you've got to take advantage of every opportunity that is available to you to replace these negative images with positive ones. Okay? And to me, that is what this conference is all about. That is why you all have spent your money to come here to be exposed to the power of the media so that you can begin to exercise your rights to assume greater responsibility for your children. So let me, you can turn the lights back on, and let me move to the last section of my presentation so we can close and take some questions from you. What I want to close on are some ways that you can defend yourself from the negative media. And I want to focus primarily on television, okay? Now, I'm not sure about the statistics here in Great Britain, but I'm sure they're not too dramatically different from the statistics in the United States. There is a company, the Nielsen Rating Company, in the United States, which monitors all television programs and solicits a schedule of people's viewing activities in order to determine the viewing habits of the American households, to determine what programs will be aired on television. And according to this latest survey, which was done last year, they said that African Americans watch television an average of 72 hours per week. The national average for television viewing is 49 hours. So African Americans watch more television, and specifically African American women and children. Okay? Now, you need to realize that television is a plug-in drug. It is addictive, all right? You watch television and you become consumed by the images that you see on television. So understanding that reality, you must begin to protect your family by doing some of the following. Let me give you a list of 8 things that you can do, that you must do. The first is you have to realize and understand that television has the opposite effect of reading. Television is designed around the selling of commercials. That's why television is free. Television is free because it's designed around commercials so that every 8 minutes you have a commercial. And the commercials are designed to sell you stuff you don't want and don't need. But it makes you believe that you can't do without. You have to go to the store for detergent. You don't know what detergent to get. So you think about a slogan comes to mind. Whatever tune comes to mind, that's what you buy. You are programmed. That's why they call it television programming. Reading requires of an individual longer attention span. Television commands that you have a short attention span, okay? The second point is, for young children, television is an anti-social experience. while reading is more socially oriented. Children will sit passively in front of television for hours if you let them. It is a one-way form of communication. Whereas if you read to your child is going to ask you, Mommy, what does that mean? Daddy, explain, read that to me again. All right, so there's a dialogue, there's an exchange between the parent and child. 3, television is unable to portray the most intelligent act known to human beings, and that is thinking. You never see people think on television. You never see people go through the process of thinking through problems. Problems are solved within 25 minutes on television. Okay? Television, number 4, television has a negative effect on children's vital knowledge, specifically children after the age of 10. Most television scripts are written for a seventh grade audience. That is, most television scripts are written for the mind of a 12-year-old child. Sentences on television programs average only 7 words. And 72% of the language in the shows consist of simple sentences or fragments. So watching too much television will interfere with your communication skills. 5, television stifles the imagination. You don't think when you watch television. 6, television overpowers and desensitizes a child's sense of sympathy, a sense for sympathy and suffering. You see somebody get shot, you see some red blood, and you flip the channel to go on to the next program. You don't understand somebody just died. So you become insensitive to death, pain, and suffering. By the age of 17, the average child has witnessed over 18,000 acts of violence. And we wonder what's wrong with our children. And since we're here in England, let me give you this association. You would have to watch all 37 of Shakespeare's plays in order to see the number of acts of human violence, which you will see in just 3 nights of watching primetime television. There's an average of 54 acts of violence within a 3-day period. Number 7, television is psychologically addictive. Sometimes you believe that you have to watch television in order to have something to talk about with your friends and coworkers. Child, did you see that program last night on television? Did you see so-and-so? Gotta see the soap operas so you can talk about it. It's garbage. How much time do you waste watching the programs? How much time do you waste talking about the programs the following day? Time that you could spend liberating yourselves mentally and economically. Do you realize that the group in America that watches the least amount of television is the Asians? And they are doing better in schools. They are taking over all of the businesses in our community because they ain't got time for that nonsense. They are about liberating themselves mentally and economically. The 8th point is television, this is very important. Based upon a recent study that was done in Canada, they came to the conclusion that television has the potential of reversing the evolution of the human brain. Okay? What children see and do on a daily basis changes their brain's function and structure. All right? So any activity which engages a child's interest will stimulate the imagination and enrich that child. The converse is also true. There is, based upon the research that was done in Canada, they found that there is a 20% creativity decrease in children and adults that watch television. All right? So if we're going to neutralize the negative effects of television, we've got to begin by educating the public. We've got to begin by dealing with, let's see, I think it's the 7th chapter of Nile Valley Contributions. I don't have time to go into all of it now because we want to close so we can have some questions. We talk about developing critical thinking skills. And in the book, we talk about 3 levels of thought, critical thought. One is the level where you accept all information that is presented to you literally. the literal level. The second is the inferential level, where you begin to infer or read between the lines to understand what is not being said. And the third level is the evaluative level, where you evaluate everything that is presented to you, determine what is true, what is untrue, what is useful, what is no good, and then use that which is of value to you. So the process of cultivating a mind for watching television, a mind for reading, a mind for accepting or interpreting someone's concept of God, you must move beyond the literal level. You must be able to infer and read between the lines and understand what is not being said, and then you must evaluate everything that is presented to you and see how it relates to your own personal and cultural experience. Okay? Let me close by giving you two. Okay, it's okay for you to do the organ. Okay, yes, okay. As a famous writer, E.B. White, noted half a century ago, television is the test of the modern world. Television is the test of the modern world. Used correctly, it can inform, entertain, and inspire. Used incorrectly, television will control families, communities, and nations. It will limit the language, the culture, the dreams, and the achievements of the people who submit to it. So let me paraphrase by quoting a famous English writer, George Orwell. Whoever controls the media controls the past, the present, and the future. So sisters and brothers, I want you to exercise your rights and responsibilities as adults. Protect your children by determining who will have access to their greatest gift, that is, their mind. Thank you very much.
After this, I think we can only say Amandla, and then we would only be a little closer. We had a brilliant presentation by Brother Browder, starting firstly in the past and giving us a view of the transformation of our symbols into European nonsense. We had an understanding of the basis of how the sense of our civilization around issues such as the number 13 has been used against us. This was followed brilliantly to something that took the smile out of my face in terms of what is the desire of all of these aims and our responsibilities in terms of television. I think that's a wonderful platform for the questions that I know that you all want to present. We have, nevertheless, to make one or two related announcements before. One, again, to bring to your attention the book written by Brother Browder, and he has just said while talking that he would be happy to sign in the cafe area at lunch break by the marketplace the book, which, as I've told you, a 25% discount is being offered on. As well as that, we need to bring to attention Brother Browder's up-and-coming national tour and study guides and conference pack. You may find this in your conference pack. And within that also a tour overleaf by Marimba Annie. Without much more ado and further announcement on this, can we open it to ourselves in this process of searching for freedom? Okay?
Can you step to the microphone?
Thanks
so
very much.
Everyone can hear you. Oh,
Sure.
thank you.
I would like to support what you said about Imogen. I everybody reads. And I wonder if people are like aware of what is happening. The other thing is, if you look at cartoons, I remember when I was smaller watching Bugs Bunny, and all the jungle ones had this black guy walking, the bone through the nose and everything like that. And we have to monitor what our kids watch, you know. Another one of the things people are saying, television, like, it influences our kids. Some of the times we have to sort of monitor that and talk with them, communication. That's what our ancestors built on. We didn't have much writing and stuff like that, but oral, you know, going down, talking to the kids, telling them stories. My great-grandfather did this. We were powerful people at that. And we need to reinforce communication with our children.
Right.
Thank you.
Let me say this with regards to the examples that you gave. Regarding this Cleopatra issue, we need to understand that Cleopatra does not represent the height of Kemetic culture and civilization. Cleopatra was the last Egyptian queen. She was born almost 300 years after Kemet had been conquered by the Greeks. So she was not pure African. So if folk want to claim Cleopatra, they can have her. She's not important. Let's go back to Queen T. Let's go back to Hatshepsut. Let's go back to people who, without a shadow of a doubt, were purely African. So they can have the last 300 years of Egyptian history if they wanted. Let's go forward 3,000 years and deal with that particular point of reference. With regards to Bugs Bunny, Sister Rosalind yesterday made the reference to the fact that the Bugs Bunny, the image of Bugs Bunny, comes out of the oral traditions of enslaved Africans in America. The story of Burr Rabbit, Burr Fox. That's what Bugs Bunny. And if you study the images in cartoons even further, you will find that Mickey Mouse was originally an image of a brother, a caricature of a brother. All right? The first animated cartoon of Mickey Mouse was Steamboat Willie. All right? And he portrayed the image of a minstrel. All right? So he was patterned after a brother. So all of these negative stereotypes have been there, and we have to be conscious of that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, sister, could you?
Oh, can I say this as the sister's coming up? I'm going to be going into a little bit more detail about some of these things in my workshop this afternoon, and my daughter will also. We're going to do a joint presentation. So my daughter's going to be on hand to share some slides and talk about her trip as well.
Thank you, Brother Browder. Totally inspiring. I wanted to ask you two questions. Firstly, during your presentation, when you were talking about the Jungle Fever film, you said while you were talking, you described the Italian-American woman as a sister. I don't know if you realize that you've done that, but you said the sister. So I was wondering if that was a slip or... Secondly, I wanted to ask you a question. It's my belief that children, as well as adults, cannot distinguish between fact and fiction on television. I mean, we actually fool ourselves. We have trained ourselves to believe that what we're seeing, the news is fact. Well, we assume the news is fact. And something like Brookside or whatever is fiction. But it's my belief that although we may believe that what's going on television is fiction, the actual relationships which are played out on television, our brains believe are fact. And I wanted you to give some comeback on that.
Regarding the first comment, Jungle Fever, a slight slip of the tongue. But listen, also understand that even within the European community, there is a hierarchy, all right? Your lighter skinned, blonde hair, blue-eyed Europeans are at the top of the scale. Your darker skinned, dark-eyed, dark-haired Europeans are at the bottom of the scale. So in the movie Jungle Fever, I don't think it was an accident that the woman that Wesley Snipes hooked up with was Italian, all right? Italians have very dark skin and very curly hair. And it's not necessarily because they're a little bit closer to the equator and got a little bit more sunlight. It's because they're a little bit closer to Africa. And African brothers have had jungle fever for thousands of years. So much so that you will note that Italians have a blood disorder which is similar to sickle cell anemia. Now, in the United States, last year, the Center for Disease Control said that from this point on, 1994 on, every person in America, every child born in America will be tested for sickle cell even white folk. Because what they have discovered is that at least 20% of white folk are really black folk. Okay?
Right. Okay.
Second part of the question.
Oh, the second part of the question, fact
Thanks.
or fiction. You're absolutely right. Television presents lies and distortions as reality because there's someone talking in such a manner that commands your respect and your attention. So you accept what they're saying. What you have to do is, as I said at the end of my presentation, is develop a discriminatory eye regarding television. Evaluate everything that is presented. Even my presentation, don't accept anything anybody gives you as the gospel truth. You need to infer, you need to read between the lines, you need to evaluate the information, check sources and double check it. If it seems like it's valid, accept it. If it seems like what I told you was garbage, throw it away. Don't buy the tape. You have to cultivate your intellect. You have to reinforce the concept of the image of Her Emaket within yourself. Okay, and by focusing on that image, this is the powerful thing about Medu Neter. See, because if you focus on the image, then you become one with that image. And everything that that image represents is transferred into your conscious and subconscious mind. So you want to focus on those positive images, and they will become you.
Beautiful. If we could have yourself next.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to get it?
I get it.
If you just give the brother 1 second, thanks. Over to you.
Greetings, Brother Browder. You spoke very well of the symbolism of Osar and Hiru. I just wondered, in the interest of duality, whether you could explain the symbolism of Osset and perhaps how that has been misrepresented also.
Okay. Asar and Haset. Haset was the complementary aspect of Asar. Haset is the prototype for the image of the Virgin Mary. And what you will see is that if you see the early images of Haset, you'll see her nursing her son. You see her nursing her son, Heru. And what later happened was when Kemet was conquered by the Greeks, they took this image of Haset and they renamed her Isis. In the study guide, I just developed a study guide for this book. These two products were designed specifically for use in the classroom. We've got the textbook and we've got the study guide with lesson plans for teachers, so there's no excuse for not using this information in the classroom. We've got a page here which talks about the relationship between Haset and Heru and Mary and Jesus. The parallels are identical. And what you will see if you study the images, when the Greeks came into Kemet, they took that image of the mother and child, Haset and Heru, and they Europeanized it and made it Isis and Horus. When the Greeks were conquered by the Romans, then the Romans took this Greekanized image of Isis and Horus and made it Mary and Jesus. They further Europeanized it and spread this information, spread these images throughout all of Europe. So that what you will find in Europe, you'll find a number of temples of the Black Madonna and Child. Okay, the Black Madonna is Haset and Heru. Even Pope John Paul II, every time he goes to his homeland in Poland, goes to the shrine of the Black Madonna, kisses the feet of Haset, and he knows it's Haset. They all know who these images really are, but for the masses, because the masses of Europeans have been brainwashed into believing in the false, in these distorted images of God, they had to change the image of the Black Madonna to make her reflect the people of Europe. Okay? Understand how important this is. Understand what would happen. I mean, this is Easter, so I mean, this is a good time to be talking about this. Understand what would happen with all of these good, God-fearing Christians if they replaced that image of a European Jesus with the image of a person of color. That would move you a little bit closer to the truth. But unfortunately, the way that religion is presented today has very little to do with truth and a lot to do with control.
Beautiful. And many of these beautiful books are all within the school system within the United States. The next question.
Etopu to the conference. I'm due to be travelling to Liverpool next week to meet a young sister who has been caught quite recently. She's 7. Since the age of 6, she's been deliberately, her mother has been saying, going out into the garden, deliberately dirtying her hands. Couldn't explain why. She's of light complexion, a light-skinned African, that's what I say. I'm due the week after to meet a young brother who's 6, who has been caught. I'm sure we've all heard the stories of people bleaching their, children being found bleaching their skins, using Vim, all that kind of stuff. Well, what's happened in these cases is, especially with the brother, he was found in his dad's cupboard in the workshop with, the boot polish, rubbing it all up and down his arms. And I spoke to him over the phone because he's seen me on a program that was on TV. That was our identification with each other. And I asked him what was going on. Apparently his parents couldn't get anything out of him. He said, "I want to be black." Now, I'd just like to hear what your views are. I'm sure we've all been through a lot of pain as regards coming to our consciousness as being Africans.
Right.
But there are both Europeans and Africans that will say to someone who is biologically from an African parent and a European parent that you're half something or that you can be neither. I'd just like to hear your views on that.
Sure.
Many thanks.
It's important. I think it was, let me go back to a European, a monk by the name of Gregor Mendel, who did experiments with peas to find that there is a certain genetic pattern that is carried out, discovered that the black is the dominant gene. And in every instance, you will find that if you put 2 black people together, male and female, they will produce a black child. You put a black male and a white female together, they will produce a black child. You put a black female, white male together, they will produce a black child. You put 2 white people together, they'll produce a white child. Black is a dominant gene. All right? What has happened is that in this society, we have been brainwashed to believe that black is inferior. And that is a lie. So what happens oftentimes is that too many of our people will buy into the lie and see blackness as a badge of dishonor. And so what happens, and I see this quite frequently in America, and I was just sharing with the brother at breakfast this morning, what happens in America is that we have people of color who have been brainwashed to reject their color. So we often find that many times in our own community, in our own circle, we will put down someone because they are lighter than we are. Or in some instances, we'll put them down because they're darker. You little black so-and-so. We will treat ourselves because of our miseducation, because of the brainwashing that we have been exposed to. We will treat our own brothers and sisters worse than the European will. And so we've got to understand that this is a sickness that we've got to overcome. Again, I was sharing with the brother that in Washington, D.C., at Howard University, for the longest time, there was a hierarchy in Howard University where the light-skinned blacks did not associate with the dark-skinned blacks, where if you did not pass the paper bag test was if your skin was darker than a brown paper bag, you were not allowed in the school. Or if you took the pencil test, that is, you put a pencil in your hair, and if you bent down and the pencil didn't fall out, okay, you were not allowed in the school. I mean, this is nonsense. This is insanity. This is nonsense about good hair or bad hair. Look, when you get to my state, any hair you got is good hair. So we've got to be willing to deal with the truth. All right? And let me just share something with you. I don't know if Brother Paul is here, but we were talking, and I've been talking with him about this conference because we do similar conferences in Washington. And he was telling me that a lot of the folk, some of the folk, not a lot of the folk, but some of the folk, and it doesn't need to be a lot, folk can say and do some evil things. That some folk were giving him the blues about what he was doing. And they couldn't understand why you half blacks were trying to do this. Do you realize that oftentimes it's the folk who are half black or the lighter-skinned blacks who are rejected by both the whites and the blacks, who wind up doing more for the black race. So I think it's important that we be honest with ourselves. And as John G. Jackson, who just passed away last year, who was a very light complexion person of African descent. I hate using the word fair-skinned. I mean, because if you use the word fair-skinned, it also denotes that there is unfair-skinned. You know? So John Jackson says he devoted. It's true.
Right over.
You know, John Jackson devoted Introduction to African Civilization to the human race. There's only one race. That is the human race. And the human race has been divided by people who have used race as an issue in order to subjugate the majority of people on this planet. As we move toward truth, then we've got to begin to educate ourselves mentally and spiritually to not bring this garbage along with us as we move closer toward the truth. Okay?
Thanks, brother. Right at the back. Yep.
Greetings, Brother Browder. I'm inspired by your story about how you've managed to sort of get your daughter to sort of get involved with the African experience in a positive way. I mean, I think one of the sisters who came up earlier was talking about comics. Comics is a very, very, very important method of communication for our youth, I feel. We have a thing running in the Alarm magazine called The Scrolls of Imhotep.
Yes,
and I think that sort of thing, we can use the medium to cancel out the kind of poisonous negativity that's presented by the Europeans, who are, after all, using a form of communications, which the prototype of which is the ancient Egyptian Kemetic language. So, I mean, in hieroglyphs and images like that. I just thought, I'd like to, share your thoughts, sort of explain what you think or feel about that.
Okay, well, again, understand, I was trained as an artist, all right? So I see history. I see my experience from an artist's perspective. And I understand the power of images. What I've been quite pleased to see within the last 5 years specifically is that as we have begun to grow in our appreciation of our African history and culture, I'm beginning to see more artists represent that history and that culture in an attempt to negate the other distortions of African history and culture. So we need to encourage that. Again, let me just, I believe in dealing with things on a very practical level. Right? And in terms of encouraging youth to follow in these footsteps, I think every person in this room needs to make a commitment to a youth to help develop or to guide a youth along a positive path, being conscious of all the forces of negativity that they're going to encounter. You have an obligation to help make the way easier for somebody. If there's a neighbor who lives near you, a young child, young brother or sister that likes to draw, buy them some art supplies. Buy them some books and tell them to reproduce some of the pictures. Buy some of their pictures from them. We've got to foster these growing interests within our children. And so by doing that, and then also, another important factor, we also have to understand the importance of having images that reflect us in our household. As I believe Malefe Asante has said this on numerous occasions, you can walk into somebody's home and within 30 seconds know their cultural orientation. All right? By the pictures they have on their wall, by the sculptures that they have on their furniture. So if you are truly serious about resurrecting your history and your culture, it should be reflected in everything that you do. And by saying that, I mean move beyond the superficial level. Someone mentioned yesterday about folk just wearing African garb. Just because you wear African clothing and have an African name doesn't mean you're African, right? It comes from here, okay? It comes from the heart. And when you do things from the heart, then people will be able to relate to that level of reality. Okay?
Okay. Many thanks. I think we're going to need to wind down to the last few questions. So can I take the sister in the back? Has she put her hand down? Okay. Can I take yourself then, brother, and then I'll move on to the... Yeah, you... Thank you. If you... Sorry. Do excuse me, I didn't see her. You first.
Yes. Thank you, Brother Browder, for really inspiring. I've learned so much. However, I want to say that I find it unfortunate that you think that we need to replace Jesus with a black image, because the true Jesus is black. And we need to get into that book ourselves. We've had it preached to us. We need to get in there and find out for ourselves. There's a whole tribe of Jews that are black, like me, Falasha Jews. And he is a man of color. Secondly, the question raised earlier about the sister from the slide that you showed. And the question was asked, did you make a slip of the tongue? I'm hoping that you could expand on that a bit more, because there are many of us here, as you yourself have said, who have found friendship among some white people who understand the issues. And in fact, there are people here, I know many people here, who could actually endorse that. And it would create, I am a teacher, it will create a lot of problems for a lot of my pupils whose parents, loving white mothers or fathers, they could not identify with unless we could take back to the classroom that it isn't about color only. It's about the understanding on these issues of race.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hold on 1 second before you leave. Could you clarify?
Yeah.
Could you clarify your first question for me with regards to the color of Jesus? I didn't understand what you were saying.
No, I thought, and I probably misunderstood you, that you were saying at this time of Easter, we've got to replace Jesus with a black image or something like that.
And then you were saying that he's already black.
He's already black.
Yeah, he is black, yes.
All right, but are you also presupposing that the images of white Jesus are okay?
No, I'm not saying that. You didn't say replace him with the true Jesus. That's what I was getting at.
It was the same thing. I mean,
okay, sorry.
It's the same thing.
Right, yeah.
As a matter of fact, you know, with regards to that issue, because it's a sensitive issue for a lot of folks, all right?
Okay.
Because they don't like you to mess with their concept of God, which is understandable on one level. But also at the same time, if we're supposed to be talking about the truth. We're supposed to deal with the truth.
Yeah.
And anybody who has difficulty accepting an image of Jesus that portrays him as a person of color is not dealing with the truth. And that's basically what I'm saying. All right, that's my point. That if you are going to deal with an image, if you choose to deal with an image, then that image should be culturally specific, as opposed to the distortions of the image that are in most homes and most churches. If we're talking about the truth. Now, if you want to deal with fantasy, that's another issue altogether.
No, I'm dealing with truth.
Okay, then,
right.
then I was just reinforcing that fact that image should be reflective of his ethnicity, and not a fallacy.
Right, and what do you think that is? What do you think his ethnicity is?
He's a person of color.
Right,
that's
okay.
That's what I said. Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Right.
With regards to the other issue. Now, look, two things. Two things. As I said before, I understand what Brother Jackson meant when he said that there's only one race, the human race, right? And I see everybody as a human being and don't choose to see, you know, one of the problems that we're confronted with, whenever we talk about loving ourselves, then other people have difficulty because they assume that because we love ourselves, we're going to hate somebody else. I don't have time to hate anybody. I understand what hate does to your psyche. I don't have time, I don't have the desire to hate anybody. I also understand the importance of loving and relating to my family first. And there's nothing wrong with that. If my daughter was in this room and there was a fire in this auditorium, I want to save my daughter first.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I have time to come back and save somebody else, I will. But my first priority is to my family, and there's nothing wrong with that. Right? So I'm not saying I should favor myself over somebody else, but at least I got enough sense to want to protect myself. Now, with regards to this issue, with regards to this issue of how Caucasians, Europeans are going to feel about us talking about this stuff. See, I can understand that, but I got a problem with it when it comes up when we talk about loving ourselves. See, before we started talking about African-centered education, before we started talking about truth and justice, correcting the lies and falsehood, I didn't see any of them come up talking about we need to deal with it. I'm not reacting to what they didn't do, but I'm saying I'm not going to determine my position based upon what I think someone else is going to react to.
I agree. I agree.
I'm a man enough.
Yeah.
And if I don't have to, see, the important thing is you don't have to build yourself up while tearing somebody down.
Right.
That's the position that I take. And if somebody has a problem with me building myself up, that is their problem.
I agree. Totally. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to just take that one more question, which I think was coming from you. I regret that I have to begin to bring it to a close, but the brother will be around signing some books, and perhaps we could take it a little further then.
Plus, we've got the workshop. I've been workshop
plus the workshop,
so continue the discussion
which will be done with his daughter, Queen Tai, and we hope further questions could be answered. Over to you, brother.
Thank you. Yesterday we had difficulty with what to do with television. And last night I picked up a book by one Dr. Carson on Think Big. And I haven't read the book overnight and can't travel down again from Southport to this place and to see what to do with television. I see that there is need for me to share this experience with you, which is developing ourselves through reading. I think the first thing we need to recover is our own self. And that is the job that we need to do. We need to read ourselves to freedom. What we have today, the wonderful lecture, I'm sure is a reproduction of several hours of reading and rediscovering self. Having shared that, I think we need to think how best to read ourselves to freedom. And in doing that, I would suggest that we are also selective about what we read. Because to be able to identify all the images and symbols and so on, and the power inherent in all those, I think there is a lot to be very careful in terms of what we select to read. Because until we have actually discovered ourselves, we will not be able to discriminate on what we read. Neither shall we be able to interpret. And I just want to share this with everyone, hoping that it will be of use in dealing with whether we are throwing away the telly or we are not. It's a matter of being able to interpret what we are viewing. And to be able to do that, I thank you for the lecture you have given. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I chime in? Can I make one comment? I agree with everything you say, brother. There's a saying in America. There was a saying. It used to be legitimate in America, saying that if you want to keep a secret from black folk, put it in a book. Okay? Now, that's a lie, because within the last 15 years, there have been more books written by and about African people than at any point in time within the last 500 years. Beautiful. So the information necessary to allow you to free your minds is available to you. What you need to do in many instances is cut off the radio, cut off the television, cut off the CD player, go to the library, read and study, discuss this information within your family circle, within your friends, on your job, and then begin to incorporate this information in your life to free yourselves.
Beautiful. Can I, at this point, before we come to a final vote of thanks, just make a number of announcements? Could parents collect their children from the creche promptly now, in that the creche workers need that to be done? There is also a need to get two brief other announcements from Askala Miriam. Is Askala available to make the announcement? Yeah, if you could do that quickly. But I'd like us all to stay. Would you like to come up here? Just come up.
May I first, before I say anything, I want to thank all the people who organized this, what discipline, and the way in which every one of us is treated. It is worth talking about. So thank you very much to Paul and everybody who organized this. Now, this is not a joke, this is serious. On the 13th of February this year, myself and Makeda Coston and Sister Afia and Melanie, who is not here, and a brother named Chukuma, was privileged to be in Gambia. And our education was that we met people in Gambia that make us feel like we were at home. The love and the welcoming that we were treated with. Mark, nobody can welcome me to what is mine, because Africa is my home, without any apologies to anybody. But to say we were privileged to go into 2 schools, and the schools that we visit, we saw children, and this is no lie, 96 children in one classroom. Some were sitting on the floor, for God's sake. Now, earlier the man said, let's support the children. Let's take it a bit further. We will never be able to walk free unless Africa is free, and unless we begin to give something. In this country, we said we are poor, but materially we have more. We are poor spiritually because we have lost that. What those children had in Gambia taught us so much, yeah, that we couldn't have read it in the book overnight. So I'm asking you to put some money on the table, because we have promised them. We had made a public pledge to these 2 schools, and a lot of these schools in Gambia, the children them grow their own food so that they can have food for lunch. Now, there was one school, there was no kitchen. There was a little hole, you understand, where they were served the food, and they sit outside on the ground. Now, we walk into a place where there was no flooring. It was dirt flooring, thatch hut. And this is the concept that said, this is African way. This is not the way we were. Now, these children were 5 and 6 years old. They were taught by an 18-year-old girl who had already done her studies. And I'm telling you, the discipline from these children was nobody's business. Yeah? The other school, the classroom that we walked into, the children asked us, what is our mission? What is your mission? And what they begged for, and they did beg. But you know what they begged for? They begged for books, pen, and paper. Now, I'm asking, plenty of you in here have more. And £10 a month is not too much to adopt a child in Gambia. There was a lot of things going on, and a lot of European people have own business. Swiss and Norwegian and everybody else but us. I'm saying, give some money now. And because that money will not go into my pocket, because we don't trust each other, we might think, church, you're going to rob it. But we won't do that, because we had made that pledge. And if we rob it, then I'm telling you, the faith that we will receive won't be no good for us. You understand? Now, somebody's going to go around, Makeda will. Okay, Makeda will, and ask you all to contribute something, because we will send that. We will leave our name and addresses with you, that if you want to have further contact and to adopt a child, at least at £10 a month, then you can do that. That's practical step that we want to take. Thank you all very much.
Could you hold on just 1 second, because we've not even thanked the brother yet, and I honestly would like to make sure we do that. Before we do that, can I have a brief announcement by Egon Femi? Could you make it brief?
To follow on from the church context, I came to this conference last year as a Christian and was fired by the information, and also received the opportunity to bring over Reverend Walter McRae, responsible for the books The Black Presence in the Bible, and he's going to be coming over in May to actually begin to bring African-centered information into the Christian church in this country. This is the first time that a scholar of the repute of Walter McRae is going to be dealing with these issues in the UK. We have got 3 events taking place on May 19th, 20th, and 21st, and further information is available, and tickets for the event are available at reasonable prices on the Source bookstore downstairs, where you'll also find further information. Thanks.
Okay. I deliberately took these liberties so that we could all bring it to a close rather than to make you impatient. There are 1 or 2 other announcements, but I'll leave that for after lunch. What I think we have to do now is to give praise and thanks to this wonderful brother Browder, who has taken us through the past into the present and given us unashamedly what we need to do as a platform for the future. I think all we can do is knock our hands together in a way, but in a sense I also want him to feel what we have felt by what he said. So if we'll stand up and give him what he deserves.